So we just came out of a 2-month winter retreat in silence. It feels like a long time ago already. But during retreat, the mind gets very soft, very quiet, very open and receptive. And then from time to time, venerable children would share with us what was happening in the news. And I would just watch my mind go like that. And I would take at least a day or so to just, shake it out, try and bring it back to the retreat. So I can't really imagine what it's like to watch and read the news every day, constantly bombarded by what appears to be bad news. So today, in today's BBC sharing, I wanted to offer Dharma methods that help me to work with my mind that gets very reactive hearing what I label bad news. So the first thing that I would often think about just to get my mind straight and not get into the fight or flight kind of response was to remind myself, this is samsara, right? This is cyclic existence. Where are you going to go where the government is perfect? Yeah. I mean, I lived in a country with an excellent government, and I, for most of my adolescence and early 20s, found fault with it, and I continue to do so. So, it's the mind's going to find something to get dissatisfied about, and you have to check out whether it's valid or not. So at least that helped to settle my mind. I wasn't going to buy a plane ticket and leave immediately. Like, I can't stand it anymore. And then what happened next was it opened up the space for me to think about karma. For the first time, I found this really helpful when I was struggling with, anytime the mind went out and wanted to blame someone, the old adage, right? When you have one finger pointing out, you have three pointing back. I would just turn the mind and say, okay, what have you done to create the cause to live in this current situation? Right? And that took a lot of effort, but just turning it again and again like that surprisingly opened the door to do a lot of purification practice. And it fit very well because I was doing the Lama Tsongkhapa Guru Yoga. So you imagine Lama Tsongkhapa and his disciples, heart disciples, and all this light flowing into you, purifying you of all your negativities, sending golden light that brings the realizations of the path. So it's the Dharma that's purifying all these past negativities, not some, magical force. So I could use the teachings to try and work with the distress and the frustration. And what really popped up for me was just looking at, if you're living in a place where you experience hearing false news or you can't trust the government, it made me really look at all the instances where I've told lies, where my own behavior was not trustworthy, where I was inconsiderate towards people who cared or just didn't bother with their feelings. An old memory popped up that was quite surprising. I hadn't even paid attention to it. Something very simple, when my mom she was a career mom most of her life. And when she retired, she suddenly decided she was going to be like the ultimate homemaker. So she went out and learned to cook. And every day she was trying to prepare these amazing meals. And she would ask me, are you coming home for dinner? I would say, yeah. And then usually, that was like in my late teens, adolescent, early 20s. And then I would call back at, say, 6:45 and say, hey, I'm not coming back. I'm just going to hang out with my friends. Bye. And that was very painful for her. She had spent the whole day cooking, and I just had no empathy for that. Yeah, so just acknowledging that, empathizing with what she must have felt, and how that actually became a big source of conflict between us. Little things like that added up. She stopped cooking my share. So I just kind of gave up. And for a period of time, I was eating at 10 p.m. too, the extra share, trying to show my appreciation. So, just looking at all these everyday instances of untruth and inconsideration helped me to see, I've created that cause, because karma is expendable. And not to feel guilty about it, just to recognize that happened and that I can change. And two, I found a lot of strength in making the resolution to do the opposite. At the end of the purification practice, we always resolve to do our best, either not to repeat the action or to do the opposite of it. So I could say I want to try my best to commit to upholding truth, respecting others, working with prejudice. And it made me think too that keeping good ethical conduct is a very powerful social action. Just getting it straight within myself. Like, if I don't like hearing lies, may I never create that cause again. And how do I do that? By being truthful. And it made me think about how 3 of the students who took the Sravasti Abbey Sravasti Abbey Friends Education Program that I facilitated last semester, and it's starting up again next week if people are interested, although we have a very large enrollment this time. I could see that when we got to the section on the 10 non-virtuous actions, This was Safe Course 1B. It was hard for people to start looking at their own behavior. But 3 of the students actually made significant changes to their lives. One of them, already from meeting the Dharma, recognized that he was engaged in a livelihood that was causing a lot of harm to beings. So he decided to give up his business. And the last that we connected, I saw that he was going back to school to learn a helping profession. So I was like, wow, just from reflecting on killing, right? Someone else too was basically moonlighting, doing informal work and not paying taxes. And she wrote me and said, is that stealing? And I said, well, yes. And she sat with it. And then toward the end of retreat, she wrote me and said, you'll be glad to know now I'm actually trying to get formally employed and I'm paying my taxes and I'm starting a regular business to help to do all the paperwork for my freelance work. I thought, wow. And 2, she's also going back to school to learn something beneficial because she said a lot of her clients have health difficulties. She wants to learn to help them, even though she works in a totally different field. And 2, one more person was in a relationship that involved lying and was getting harmful to her family. And that was a lot of distress, but she could see that it wasn't helpful and she stepped out of it through the process of taking this course. I thought, wow, the Dharma has a powerful impact. Cleaning up our ethical conduct is not easy, but it really influences all the beings that we come into contact with. I was just thinking about all the beings whose lives are saved because this person gave up their business, right? People paying taxes, contributing to the country. Yeah, and of course, this person's family doesn't have to live with the lies anymore. And it makes a huge impact on the next generation. So I guess coming out of retreat, it just made me think that the fundamental piece of our social action has to start with personal ethical conduct. At least that's the way it is for me. And it was important for me to come back to that because before I became a nun, I was thinking, maybe I should go back to working in this nonprofit and doing activist work because I used to volunteer a lot with a nonprofit that worked with low-wage migrant workers in Singapore. But what turned it around for me was I connected with an old friend who does that full-time, barely gets any salary. His job is to accompany abused workers to the labor court and help them with their cases and just make sure they have shelter during the period of time. And as we were talking, he was talking about the latest case again, the government, all the problems, blah, blah. And he said to me, it is my job to be angry. Yes, I had exactly that response. I thought, I don't know if I want to do that. And it made me very sad too, because I could see in his personal life it was causing a lot of stress, one broken relationship after another because he was so obsessed with, this cause he was going to fix. And I heard him talking too about, I asked him, what do you think are helpful actions in the future? He's like, maybe we should have armed protests against the government. I was like, I don't know about that. So that was a good, helpful meeting in that sense that it made my mind quite clear that I wanted to choose a different path. So recognizing that we live in cyclic existence and that we create karma all the time and experience its effects and that we can purify it helped me a lot to calm my mind. And I thought that was a helpful first step. Yeah, and it helped me to see what we have that's going well. Yeah, that we can improve on, what already is working and what we can improve on instead of always finding fault. So to finish off, I wanted to share an article that I found online in one of those sad nights where I was actually Googling how to heal America, something like that. Like, this is so sad. And there was a helpful article that popped up that I now want to share with you. I know Google doesn't have all the answers, but it may sometimes. So this is an article by a rabbi named David Wolpe. I'm sorry, I don't know how to pronounce his last name. He serves in a synagogue in LA. And it's a great piece. It's called How to Heal America's Splintered Soul. So I know we don't believe in souls, but the beginning part of it, he talks about why there's been so much pain and rift in American society, and he pointed out some helpful causes. For instance, long campaign time, right? You have 2 years of mudslinging, so it's not going to go away overnight. And now there's less shared culture, so everyone's choosing what they watch, and there's a lot of mutual incomprehension and stereotyping. There are just fewer things that are bringing people together. And also, neutral organizations have become politicized, so like the FBI, the police, the media, places that were not lightning rods for political conflict have now become that. And well, the last point I thought was good, though, that there's no agreement on a common enemy. At least we could say, People are debating what is the enemy, so may not be such a bad thing. So here's what he says at the end of his essay that I'm going to just read out. So Rabbi David says, simply pleading for people to come together has no effect. The societal forces that promote separation are real and growing. The few places that remain apolitical, like professional sports, provide too few opportunities for lengthy, informal interactions that might reduce the cracks in the American soul. We need to encourage the spaces where we meet. Religious institutions should seek to stay apolitical so they can accommodate all people. Everything from playgrounds to bowling alleys should be areas of conversation and commonalities, not political argument. When public issues infect private relationships, friends become adversaries. The nation will not be healed from the White House. It has to be healed in backyards, in halls of worship, in public parks and clubhouses. Nothing lowers temperatures like seeing someone play with their dog or push a child on a swing. We need to leave behind the voting booth and be human again. In dictatorships, everything is about politics. Not here. America is not the land of politicians. It is the land of people. Oh, and if other people had thoughts about what helped you to work with your mind, did you want to take a moment to share that or not?
Work in progress, which is why I've been trying to read Jeffrey Hopkins' True Flow of Heart, is saying, just like me, they want to be happy and not suffer. And I don't have to affirm the behavior that's seeking it, but I can really affirm the deep desire, despite the confusion. That's truly what they're trying to do, and that's no different than me. So trying to bring them into my space of that deep, deep desire that I do every moment of my life, from the time I get up in the morning to the time I go to bed. Those two things drive my actions of body, speech, and mind. And like them, they also have that same deep desire. So I try to humanize. I've been demonizing them a lot, and so to bring the humanity back into my thinking about them.
Yeah, too. I think the practice of reflecting on karma helps me with that. It's like, yeah, I've lied. Thinking was going to help, though it hasn't.